Even the most ambitious, green, well-intended, sustainable company in the world cannot get to net zero with internal changes alone. Even if everyone working in this company holds their breath during their shift so that no CO2 comes out their lungs, there will still be leftover emissions that need to be addressed. At least for now, considering the technology that we have available at the present time. With that, in order to truly reach net zero, a carbon offset strategy is absolutely necessary. Now, we're all familiar with the stigma around carbon offsets. Some say that they are a license to pollute or just something that's part of a company's greenwashing strategy. However, these claims are actually statistically incorrect. In a paper published by MSCI, the research conducted by Trove indicated that companies that use carbon offsets are decarbonizing twice as fast than companies that don't. The link for this paper will be in this podcast description, by the way, so you can check out yourself as well. When you look at it objectively, it makes perfect sense. After all, carbon offsets cost money, and there are costs that can only be avoided if emissions are avoided, which means that carbon offsets, besides having a huge positive impact on nature and the planet, also function as a strong incentive for companies to reevaluate their practices in order to become more sustainable. So, how does that work in practice? Well, it all starts with 3 simple steps. Step 1, you measure your emissions. You figure out how much CO2 your company is actually responsible for. And this includes the obvious stuff, your factories, your offices, your company cars. But it also includes the less obvious things like supply chain, business travel, or even the emissions that are generated from the products after customers buy them. All these types of emissions are classified as Scope 1, 2, and 3, and if you'd like to learn more about this, you can dive deeper into our specific webinars and podcast episodes exploring this topic on our website, green.earth. In step 2, you reduce what you can. This is the non-negotiable part. Carbon offsets are great, but nothing beats the effectiveness of avoiding unnecessary pollution on our planet. It's easier not to spill something than clean it, right? And again, the more you reduce, the less you need to compensate for. Ideally, you'd only offset for the emissions that your company really cannot avoid. For example, with the current available technology, an airline can't exist as a business without gushing out CO2 from their airplane engines. Of course, they can strive for more effective routes or engines that don't utilize as much fuel, but for now, it's impossible to get to zero. And that's where carbon offsets come in for them. And then step 3, very simple, you offset the rest. For those residual emissions, the one you genuinely cannot eliminate, you invest in projects that remove or prevent an equivalent amount of CO2 from entering the atmosphere. This is the part that you need to be very careful though, because choosing the correct project that is actually removing or avoiding carbon emissions is the key for a successful offsetting strategy. A high-quality carbon credit represents 1 ton of CO2 that's generally removed or avoided. It needs to be measurable. You have to be able to prove it happened. It needs to be additional, meaning the project wouldn't have happened without the carbon credit funding. You shouldn't just pay for a tree that's already standing in the middle of the Amazon forest. And it needs to be permanent. A forest that gets cut down 5 years later will never count. And this is why transparency is extremely important for carbon projects. The good news is that with proper due diligence, you can make sure you're indeed acquiring high-quality carbon credits that are actually impacting nature as we expect them to. Checking for third-party certification from agencies like Gold Standard or Verra are a great way to make sure that the project you're buying into is legit. And of course, you should get to know the project yourself, research the company, get to know the people that work there. And when you talk about high-quality carbon removal, nature-based solutions are kind of unbeatable. We're talking about reforestation, agroforestry, mangrove restoration, regenerative agriculture. These aren't theoretical technologies that might work or not. They're proven biological processes that have been sequestering carbon for millions of years. Trees are really good at this. They've been practicing for quite a long time. Nature-based credits align with multiple corporate priorities, including environmental restoration, biodiversity preservation, and social responsibility. High-quality nature-based projects can sequester carbon at scale using biological processes that are proven and measurable, They also can support biodiversity by restoring degraded habitats and protecting threatened ecosystems. They improve water security and soil health, enhancing the landscape resilience, and they generate employment and boost local economic development, especially in rural and underserved areas. That is super important because those areas and the people that live there now have economic interest in these projects. So that means for them, it is actually more profitable to keep that project running. This multidimensional impact makes nature-based solutions particularly attractive for companies with integrated ESG goals or stakeholder sustainability commitments. So let's talk strategy. How are the companies that take this seriously actually approaching carbon offsetting? Well, first of all, they're diversifying. Instead of putting all their eggs in one basket or all their credits in one project, they're building portfolios. A mix of removal and avoidance credits, projects in different regions, different timelines. That's basically risk management. If one project underperforms, the whole strategy is not going to collapse because of that. Second, they're thinking long term. Smart money isn't buying credits on the spot market year after year, because that's super expensive. They are locking in forward purchase agreements, committing to buy future credits from projects that are still developing. This does two things, basically. It secures the supply in a market where high-quality credits are actually increasingly scarce, and it provides upfront financing that helps projects actually get built. Companies like Microsoft, Meta, Swiss Re are all taking this approach, and increasingly smaller companies are following as well. The reason for all that is the regulatory landscape is changing. Regulation is coming. The EU Green Claims Directive is raising the bar for how companies can talk about environmental impact. You just can't slap carbon neutral on your packaging anymore without being able to prove it. Initiatives like the CSRD are requiring detailed disclosure of emissions reductions and offset use. What this means in practice is, if your offsetting strategy isn't transparent, traceable, and defensible under external audit, you're exposed. The companies that treat offsetting as a strategic investment rather than a last-minute checkbox are going to be in a much stronger position when these regulations kick in. High-quality nature-based credits are already in short supply. Demand is rising every year. Regulations are tightening. Whoever's locking in forward agreements today are securing access to the best projects at reasonable prices, while everyone else will be scrambling for whatever's left in the future. But it's not just about supply and pricing, it's about building something real. A well-designed offset strategy doesn't just neutralize emissions. It supports reforestation, protects biodiversity, creates jobs in rural communities. You're not buying a number on a spreadsheet, you're investing in projects that will be growing, absorbing carbon, and benefiting ecosystems for decades. If you want to hear more about how nature-based carbon projects work, please check our website, green.earth. The Green Earth Podcast is a Green Earth initiative. Green Earth is a large-scale nature-based project developer, and our goal is to help nature flourish and prosper. If you want to read more about our projects, the link is also in the description. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving us a review. And if you know anyone that might benefit from this content, we'd greatly appreciate your recommendation. I'm Pedro Zimmer, your host, and I hope to see you for the next episode of the Green Earth Podcast.